I'm Steve Townsend with UCAT, and I do a lot of the assessments with vehicles. I do workstations also, and I'm the guy who does a lot of the planning for what types of hand control devices people might use. But and so, you know, I guess everybody knows what UCAT is, right? Or do you need to? Okay. So we through the years we've had this problem with how do you put a wheelchair on a small car, and most of these people, they can't afford a minivan, you know, or something larger to carry their wheelchair, and so there really hasn't been a way to work at it. They've tried to put wheelchairs and scooters on the back of small cars, and sometimes it's bent the frame and it's ruined the car, and it drags, and you can't get through dips, and it's just a real problem, you know. And so Bruno came up with this new device this year, the last couple of months it's come out, and UCAT purchased one to have as a demo, okay? And when you have clients who have this problem, you know, they have a small car, but they have a wheelchair, you know, and they can take a few steps around to the back of their vehicle. Still, they're not, you know, they're not, or they can make their transfer and they can take their steps around the car. Then this should be a real good answer for them. We can put this on just about any car, you know. This is just a hybrid, and so it's not supposed to have any kind of a big hitch on it, but so I just have this little 1.5-inch hitch, you know, the class 1 hitch that solves the problem. So what reason why this lift is so good, it has wheels, okay? And so you don't have the weight on the bumper, you have the weight on the wheels, and they swivel. These wheels just swivel around in place. And so a person comes around to their position here, and they can operate this to go down. And while they've been in transport, they've had this hooked up here, okay, and so they can get that to that, you know, down to the ground level, and just drive their wheelchair on. It's got the 3 tie downs, and you know, the other problem is, you know, they've got to be able to, I think anyway, they've got to be able to have the ability to put a cover on their wheelchair, you know, and I guess they could have it up high, so they can reach to put the cover around the wheels and stuff, you know, so the cover should go all the way around, and so that there isn't the spray coming up and into the electronics of the wheelchair. That makes sense, everybody? I mean, any questions on that? So yeah, I think they would want to raise it up to a high enough level that would make it easier to grab, you know, to reach, to attach the bungee or whatever they're using to get that cover over that. So, you know, they could have it lower to put the cover on, and then raise it up, put the cover around the bottom of the wheelchair. All those little ways to simplify the job.
Barbecue cover.
Yeah, barbecue cover. Yeah, I know somebody tried that and used a barbecue cover.
They tried it, or they did it and it was successful. But you didn't use it?
I think I've heard that. What do you say, John?
I've known people to use barbecue covers and also swamp cooler covers. Both of those. If you go to the wheelchair manufacturers, they want between $100 and $150 for a wheelchair cover. You can buy a swamp cooler cover or a barbecue cover at Lowe's or Home Depot for about $35. So it's a good option if it fits your wheelchair or scooter.
I didn't introduce John. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm John Nunley with Mobility Solutions. We're a mobility equipment dealer and supplier. We work pretty closely with Steve and Ken and Kevin at UCAT to work with them in assessments, but then we're the ones who actually do the work. We would be the ones, at least it's a bid process typically, but we're one of the vendors that does a lot of this. We're in Sandy, Utah, just south of here. but we do the installations on this and the other things you'll see here today.
One thing about this lift of it, I mean, it really solves a big problem. If you look at that little red car right behind you,
The Cavalier.
that little Cavalier can actually tow this thing around with it, and you don't have to have any kind of suspension upgrade or anything on it. And it really works it solves a great problem that we've had with the smaller cars, with someone that has a power chair or that can't get it around at all. That little car can get it around with this thing now.
What does one of them cost?
I think the bids are around $4,000. Yeah, there's 3 bidders, you know, and so you just get the 3 bids, the 3 dealers, and about 4,000, something like that.
What's it actually called then?
It's called the Chariot. It's made by Bruno, and yeah, Chariot. And you can show it to your clients, your consumers, and you can send them over to UCAT, and we can have them try it, you know, loading their wheelchair on and see how that would work for them. So we bought this so that we can be less blind in our assessments and, you know, and evaluations, and we can be able to make sure that it's the right thing for whoever you're referring us to.
What type of hitch does it take?
It's just a class 2, or just a 1 1/4 receptacle, receiver, I should say.
And it just hooks up to the battery, too.
Right, yeah. And so as you can see on this car, usually you'd have this wire all, you know, tucked in through underneath the car, you know, but so it just wires up, and then you have your lights hooked up just like you would any kind of trailer, and then the other one is for the direct current from the battery.
It will also work on a class 3, which is the 2-inch. It's just the class 3 is not required. So if you have a vehicle that already has a class 3, we can order this with the class 3 adapter.
Yeah, we do have an adapter. We can carry it on one of our other vans too.
One thing I might mention, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the alternative to this. The alternative to this, and what this kind of supplements, is the standard outside lift, where it's real similar to this, but it comes out of the hitch and everything is supported on that hitch. It does not have these wheels, and so the full weight of the lift and the scooter or wheelchair has always been supported by this hitch and the suspension on the car. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with that, but that's why this is such a good alternative. You take a 100+ pound lift and a 300 pound wheelchair and you put it on like that little Cavalier, it's going to be bottoming out that suspension. So that's where this has come along and solved that problem. The standard type of lift we've historically done is still a good alternative for a heavier SUV, a van, something like that has heavy enough suspension. It's roughly about $2,000 or $1,800 cheaper than this. So this isn't the end-all be-all if you've got an application where the standard one works.
Do you expand the platform out?
Yeah, it does have some. It has.
Yeah, these slide out.
Yeah, so you can move them quite a ways.
This is actually adjusted almost to its smallest point. Each of these ends will move out an additional 4 inches, so this platform could be made to be about 8 to 10 inches wider than it currently is, or longer.
I know there's been a little something that we've purchased before called a scooter trailer. Is this a better alternative? I know the scooter trailer
Lot better alternative.
would be cheaper, but
Anybody want to answer that? Why they? Okay, Donnie.
Not only can not everyone drive a scooter trailer and sticking way out behind the car, but the other thing is that this particular lift, even if for an SUV, if you got this lift as opposed to a normal on the hitch lift, you can put it on any car, so it's not going to sit in a storage until you find another person to use it. It could be used on almost any vehicle, and so it's going to make it more flexible.
That's a great point, Donnie. Yeah. So.
One of the, well, I'll mention what I think. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to comment with the scooter chair, or the scooter trailer that we have down there. I've towed it behind an escape like that, and you can't see it. And they're very hard to maneuver around, very hard to back up. So
they jackknife a lot.
They jackknife easy, so that would take all of those problems out of, or solve all those problems.
Yeah, anybody who has a problem with pulling a trailer and backing up with a trailer, this solves that problem. Okay, and there was a question over here about the weight capacity. The weight capacity is 350 pounds, so just about any powered wheelchair or scooter, I can't imagine something being too heavy for it, really.
The one thing about this is that the parking, you can actually park it in a regular handicapped spot, so you don't need the sides on either side of it. Plus, it'll actually, you can pull into a regular spot and still park it with this. Whereas if you got that trailer on the back, you're going to need 2 parking spaces back to back to park it, and it's not a very good option.
Just a couple other things to add on that. I don't know if you notice, but these are actually caster wheels. You can see they're not parallel. They swivel. So when you're backing this up, you need to pay no mind to where this is going to go. It's going to be right here all the time. With the trailer, it's very difficult to back up, and the shorter the trailer, the more difficult it is, and they are very short trailers. They're also, this is fully powered. It's push of a button and it lowers. The scooter trailer, you still have to undo some shackles, manually lower a ramp. It's a lot more labor intensive to do it, and it is about, by the time you get it out there, it's 6 to 8 feet long. So with the platform folded, you're really just a couple of feet longer than your bumper.
So does it ride pretty well when you're towing?
Yeah, it doesn't feel like that you're pulling anything. Yeah, probably for some people who have a hatchback, they would have to lower it down and bring this out to raise their hatch. Okay, and I probably have this scootered in a little bit too far for this hatch to come up, but it has a longer range, so you could have it out farther if you needed it to. I have this scootered about 3 inches farther than it needs to be into the receiver. Okay, go ahead.
So what about unhooking it if let's say the caregiver doesn't want it on the car at all times?
Okay, that's an excellent question, and it's a horrible thing to try to take off. Okay, yeah, that's a big drawback because it's you have it adjusted for the right height for your car, and that hitch, the receiver is not, you don't want it to be loose, and so because it'll jiggle, and so it's going to be real tight in there, and I think it's going to take a couple of strong guys at least to get that to come out. And there's tricks to be pulled, like you can put this down and to get it, take all the weight off and things like that, but it's still kind of jimmied in there. It's just like putting 2 pipes together. You have to put them in, 2 square pipes, one the telescopes into the other, and if you get them inside just a little bit kinked one direction or the other, or up or down, then it's really difficult. And we struggled with that this morning, trying to get this on here, and so I think it's a downside. And would you agree, John? Or?
Yeah, but it's not any worse than what has been the alternative, and it's actually a little bit better in that you've got some tires there to help support the weight of it while you're trying to maneuver it in. It's not a simple process to put it on and off.
Well, and probably 75% of the time it's going to stay on the car.
Well, you'd hope it's 99% of the time. But, it's just either you need it or you don't, but it's not that hard to drive around town with this on, and there's no wheelchair on it for a month. Would you agree, John?
Yeah, another consideration to assistive technology and modifications to vehicles has always been, okay, we've got this high mileage old car. Do we really want to put a bunch of money into it and have it break down in a year? And with modifications and equipment that become permanent to that vehicle, that's a major consideration. This is not really permanent to this vehicle. It's very simple to move from one vehicle to the next. So if you do have somebody with an older car, it's not as much of a consideration, because if it breaks down, the lift and the modifications don't necessarily go with the car. The only consideration there would be the hitch, and that's about a $200 item. So to move it from one car to another is very easy and relatively inexpensive, just adding the hitch. And then, like Steve said, it adds so little weight to the back of the car as far as tongue weight that it's not going to put a lot of undue stress on most cars. The only consideration would be, I guess, would be an old tired car with very little power. You put a 300-pound chair on it along with approximately 200-pound lift. They're pulling 500 pounds but not carrying that weight. So that might be a little bit of a consideration, but as soon as you put two adults in the back seat, you're making that same weight. So it's not much of a consideration as far as the age and the type and condition of car. What we found is that if you lower this down to where it just touches the ground, barely, so, and maybe even just a hair up, you can pull it out, and the weight, it wants to kind of tip this way. It does depend on where the caster wheels are swiveled to, but basically you can lower that to the ground and slide it out, and it's going to sit there. It's not going to want to tip forward. It's going to carry the weight on the two wheels and the platform there. So if you do that, you don't have to worry about, once you get it clear of the hitch, having it want to tip one way or another really quickly and get away from you. And that's what I recommend to people, is when they are taking it off, run this down to the ground, leave it close enough to where you can keep the power hooked up, put it down, slide it out, and then you can run this back up. We don't have one, but I understand you guys have one of the wheels, the storage and movement wheels. So I don't know exactly how that works, but apparently as an option, there's a piece that hooks in here that's a third wheel to allow you to move it around.
Yeah, I haven't figured out how to make that work when you're going to, well, it's just another caster. It's a large caster that you could put on here. We're still working on those things to make it a little simpler for like storage. If they're not going to use it for a month or two, they could have it stored in the garage and easily, so that they could just put it on real fast. But I'm sure there's going to be an evolution to all those things to make it easier and easier to use for your consumers.
There is some suspension built into this. These arms right here come down and they go into here, and it's some sort of torsion bar type setup. If you go to YouTube, they have some really good videos, and they show this going through some pretty severe dips, and you can see these wheels articulating on that suspension.
So if all your questions are answered, what I do mostly is help people assess hand controls. And so I have on this, you know, the chair will come out if they need to drive in their wheelchair, and there's a device that that locks the wheelchair down when they're in there. They just drive in, and it just locks it down, and so they can have any of an assortment of hand controls that I can just plug in. Okay, I have some that are I can show you. They're really quite weak, like if they have quadriplegia. This hand control right here links onto the gas and the brake pedal right here, and they can hold on like this, and that's their gas and brake. Okay, and I can have that on either side of them. Now, so I bolt this in when they come, and it looks like they're not going to be able to make it using a regular hand control on the steering column. Then I'll bolt this down to the floor, and I'll just set it up so they can drive with this device. Okay, so if you have a consumer who wants to drive, you know, you just make the referral to UCAT, and we'll figure out something for them. Okay, it's an art and it's a science. You know, sometimes it takes several weeks or maybe a few months after they get the stuff to figure out how to adjust it just right for their needs. You know, we don't. It's the fitting process is long, and it takes a long time for someone with quadriplegia to be able to get it just right, because their weakness is so individual, right? Okay, so let's see. When you're speccing things out, sometimes you can get a real nice tie-down strap, you know, like this. That it depends on the person's abilities and the caregiver's abilities. Sometimes this kind of thing is necessary if the caregiver's already blown out their back, you know, and they've hurt themselves a number of times. If you spend a couple $100 more for something like this, it just hooks on and snugs down, and that can really make a difference. Okay, so that's all I have. If you want to see some of these hand controls, probably you've all seen hand controls. You know, it's just usually on the steering column, and you push or pull or different directions. And what are the downsides of a lowered floor conversion? Anybody want to?
Lowered floor.
Yeah, it's lowered. Lowered ground clearance. Okay, it's going to have, you know, it's been tweaked. You know, and you have more things that could go wrong. You know, so if we can avoid that, then let's do that. If we want to just have a little lift that's in the back that lifts the wheelchair in the back or the side, maybe that's a lot better, because then if that van wears out, if they crash the van, they can hurry and get another van and just plug that stuff in. You know, if we can avoid a lowered floor van, let's do it. You know, and try to talk them out of doing this kind of thing, and show them the upsides of some of the other ways to do it.
Really, your clients that are having anything done, really, even if it's this Chariot or something like Ken has, or any number of other modifications and equipment you're having put in a van, it's really easy to talk to your insurance company and get a rider put on that vehicle for like that Chariot lift. I know for these, most people tell me it's about $100 every 6 months to add the rider to cover the modification. For something like that, I would anticipate it would be, you know, less than $100 a year to have that covered under your automobile policy. But it is something, that is an important point that you'll want to stress with your clients that you're buying this equipment for. Make sure they have it properly insured, so if there is an issue, replacing it becomes a lot easier. In this case, the floor's lowered 12 inches. It has this ramp installed in it, the power door. That's all part of the van. The platform lift, we're limited in what kind of vans and what years and models of vans that'll work in, but this conversion like this is upwards of $20,000, where a platform lift is about a $6,000 conversion. Things that have changed with the stow and go seating and a lot of that, where we're not able to do that platform type lift in a minivan any longer. A full-size van like a Ford Econoline or a Chevy Savannah, those are the bigger full-size vans. They are still available, and we can set one of those up with a platform like that and tie-downs for less than $6,000, where a system like this is going to be upwards of $20,000. So that is a good alternative to this, you know, economically.
How about the under chassis?
That's
Basically,
that's available on a full-size van. It's a similar type thing to the platform lift in that the van itself is not fully modified. A couple of downsides: it essentially does the same thing as the platform that folds down, but it goes under the vehicle.
yeah, you don't waste any.
They're about twice as much. They're in the neighborhood of $12,000–13,000, but you lose a ton of ground clearance. You're actually, by the time you do that on some vans, you're less ground clearance on that than you are in this one. We see quite frequently people with those under van lifts, they'll hit them on a curb, catch them on a curb, and it doesn't take a lot to literally do thousands of dollars of damage. The areas where they're not salting and sanding roads, they're going to work a lot better. That's one of the downsides to those lifts, along with the expense. The benefit is, on those platform lifts, you do take up roughly about 10 inches to a foot of the space from the door into the van. The type that fold up and go into the van are far superior as far as reliability and as far as cost of maintaining them. You know, we've got customers out there with lifts that are 20 years old, and they come see us once a year for just a minor tune-up, where those UVLs, the few of them that are out there, we tend to see them every year or two with a major repair.
Let's move over to this other van we have. I can give you the scoop on a full-size van we have with the lift.
And this will have one of those lifts in it that we're talking about that folds up inside.
You've probably all seen this also, but this is the way we had to do it years and years ago before there were lower floor vans. And some people need a full-size van because of many factors. You know, they have more family members, or they just have need a cargo space or whatever. And so what this van has is what John was just talking about, this type of a lift that stows inside. So this is the van we'd always recommend if somebody has a full-size van here in Salt Lake or northern part of the state. What's nice about what we have this set up for is we have a lowered floor here of about 6 inches. So you can also lower the floor on this type of van, but you know, not as many inches. But you don't need as many inches because it has a higher roof. Okay, so this gives you the room to get in, and what a lot of people have set up is they have this kind of a lift, maybe a lowered floor if they're taller, and they have a swivel seat. Okay, the person would back against the side wall here, the other side wall, and then there's these controls, these buttons over here, so you can make this seat go back, and they can have it go up and down to a height that's going to be or make the transfer easier. Okay, and then it has a button to swivel it around also. Okay, so they can come all the way around and make that transfer quite easy, you know, just to slide across. They can have their slide board or whatever if they need to, but that's what makes that work for people. So you can get this 6-way powered seat is what they call it.
One thing I'll add to this, with this conversion on these full-size vans, we can do something like this to just about any full-size van. So if you've got a client, in most cases, the way I understand it, they're required to buy the vehicle. So they have to come up with the vehicle, even if they qualify for the assistance on the mobility equipment. With a conversion like is done on that Toyota, we can only do that to a relatively new vehicle. It can only be maybe 2 to 3 years old with less than 40,000 miles on it. So a van like that's going to be quite expensive. If you've got a client that may not be able to afford that but needs something like this, we can do this to any full-size van. We've had a lot of clients go out there and find a really good used van for $5,000–6,000 that's going to get them several years and lots more mileage of use, and we can put a modification like this in it, where a minivan they would be looking at a $15,000 to $20,000 van to even be able to do the modification.
So there's also another kind of conversion to a minivan, and that would be a lowered floor in the back, okay, and a ramp in the back, okay, and the floor can be lowered just to the rear part if it's just going to be a passenger in a wheelchair, so that there can be a rear part conversion, and it can be a manual or automatic conversion. Okay, so a manual conversion would be just the caregiver lifts the hatch and pulls the ramp down manually, you know, and it's real easy, you know, good mechanical advantage there, but still it has some advantages and disadvantages, you know, because you don't have all those gadgets that might go you know, that might go out on you. But so there's the manual and automatic on the rear hatch. Okay, all the minivans have a front wheel drive. Okay, And if somebody wanted a conversion on a one of those elements, okay, they'd have to go with the front-wheel drive element and not a four-wheel drive element, okay, because the conversion is going to be where that drive shaft would be. So this has a rear drive, but you know, they can still they raise the chassis up a little bit before they lower the floor. That still gives you room for the drive shaft. Well, let's see. I guess that's good. Get you. Don't want to get you sunburned out here.
Hey, thank you.
You're welcome.